Hem size hem bize. Yarı sana yarı bana.
Humans can exist sustainably and collaboratively with nature in any environment, except under the pressures of global capitalism. This is the central thesis of Honeyland, a documentary that follows the day-to-day life and labour of Hatice, a beekeeper who maintains traditional methods of wild honey farming to support her ailing mother. Her peaceful traditional lifestyle in the isolated mountains of North Macedonia has seemingly changed forever upon the arrival of the Sam family, who have come to make their living as beekeepers themselves. Hatice offers her wealth of knowledge and expertise to the family, but her philosophy of taking no more than what is needed is unable to coexist with the demands of the market.
Ja mislim da će da ima, da izvlači. A? Kako? A?
Nemam sapet. Aj, vratio.
With 7 children to support, the Sams are pressured into over-harvesting their honey, a transgression that has disastrous effects across the entire ecosystem. The film is an observational documentary, with no participation from directors Tamara Kotoveska and Ljudmir Stefanov. As a consequence of Hatice's village not having electricity, the filmmakers relied strictly on natural lighting, as well as oil lamps and candlelight. The team shot virtually the whole film on lightweight DSLR cameras, a decision that didn't compromise the stunning visuals but potentially made a far less intrusive effect for the subjects. By spending up to 3 years shooting and properly bonding with the family, it makes sense that the comfortability behind the camera and fly-on-the-wall quality was achieved. With many of the filmmakers citing the fact that the Sams only speak Turkish,
kind of approach where you feel like it's a fly on the wall. Maybe one of the reasons is that none of the crew members understand Turkish language, the language that it's spoken. And I think that because we didn't understand the language, they could freely talk whatever they want. They were not hesitating.
the filmmakers were awaiting transcripts for the footage, and Hatice's occasional translation saw the crew rely almost entirely on cinematic language instead. This may or may not have also influenced the lack of sit-down interviews, but it is more in line with their choice of mode. The film is unique amongst documentaries in this observation mode in its underpinning of a strong ecological message, rather than the more passive observation of events and their consequences that Nichols describes. It is this blending of documentary, polemic, and drama that has caused Honeyland to be described as an ecological fable. This in itself brings with it a host of ethical questions. One of the more prominent considerations is that of Hatice's agency within the film. If Hatice's everyday life, with its moments of both joy and crushing sadness, are to be reconstructed and repurposed into a fable, does it rob her of some humanity? And, if so, for whose benefit? These concerns were articulated by Andy Rice as, quote, "When they play as fables for viewers like those at the New York screening, ruminating on the end of Hatice's way of life, observational films do encode a moralizing message, and one that follows from the dicey impulse to salvage the exotic." However, these criticisms risk a paternalistic assumption that Hatice lacked any input in the creation of the film. In reality, extra textual material reveals that Hatice had been wanting to tell her story to the world before the arrival of the filmmakers.
The first reaction to her was probably a shock, and then she said that this is something she was thinking of a lot, how to find a way to tell her story to the world. So this is her wish, in a way.
This side of Hatice, one who desires an international understanding and televisual preservation of her efforts, is not seen in the film. This leads to further criticism that the film mystifies Hatice's practices. For all her good humour and charisma, Hatice also symbolises a bygone, somewhat mystical relation to local ecology because the film alludes her media-savvy, economic thinking, political views, and limited choice in relation to her lifestyle. A particularly critical view came from Diana Laudanova, who states that Honeyland is a bona fide Flattarian reenacted documentary that does not stand to fairly represent Hattijah's impoverished conditions, which are ultimately a result of political choice to neglect isolated communities. The film prods a notion of longing for this ideal ecological sustainability posed against the body of a struggling life. Laudanova furthers an important ethical sentiment that, quote, filmmakers from isolated communities cannot gain attention unless they resort to self-exoticism.
The sense of Honeyland as a parable also comes from its very cinematic structure. The first act introduces us to Hatijah's apicultural process, as well as her limited interactions with the market traders of Skopje. The transition to the second act is clearly defined, with the Sams bursting into the film and Hatijah's world with an unabating roar of chaos. This stark oral shift that heralds the arrival of the Sams seems to facilitate an irrevocable transition from the old ways to the new, indicating that Hatijah's existence has been forever changed. One might assume that the arrival of the Sams would incite conflict between the neighbours. However, Hatijah is immediately welcoming, enjoying the newfound company. The conflict begins when potential buyers of the Sams' honey start to increase their demands. This continues into the third act. A tragic crisis in Hatijah's life occurs when the death of her bees coincides with the death of her mother. This prompts her to consider leaving Berkija for the first time. The film concludes with Hatijah leaving her village, but not before finally enjoying some of her well-earned honey. That Hatijah was ultimately forced out of the village that she knew and cared for more than any other is a testament to the film's central truth claim, that there is no corner of the earth isolated enough to outrun the forces of capitalist modernity. It poisons ecological systems, community and social relations, as well as traditional knowledge and lifestyles.